Patrice Lumumba, the first legally elected Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, was assassinated on 17th January 1961. This heinous crime was a culmination of two interrelated assassination plots by American and Belgian governments, which used Congolese accomplices and a Belgian execution squad to carry out the deed. A Belgian author, Ludo de Witt, in one of his best books of this crime, qualifies it as the most important assassination of the 20th century. The assassination's historical importance lies in a multitude of factors, the most pertinent being the global context in which it took place, its impact on Congolese politics since then, and Lumumba's overall legacy as a nationalist leader. Patrice Lumumba was the first Prime Minister of the independent state of Congo and was effectively in power for only 10 weeks, but he has become a figure of myth and legend. To some, a martyr, to others, a monster. He had even written an intelligent and even humorous book, Congo, Mon Pays, about the tribulations of his country under Belgium, in which he seemed to see Congo's future as a cooperative effort with the Belgians to move from paternalism, tribalism and colonialism to independence and national unity. This is the story of the rise and fall of Patrice Lumumba. For decades, the question of how Patrice Lumumba died and related questions of who killed him and why was subject to much speculation. The short answer is that Lumumba was executed by a firing squad on January 17, 1961, and his body dissolved in sulfuric acid. Just how he came to be in that position requires a longer discussion that takes into consideration the political climate of Congo and the state of international relations at the time. Patrice Lumumba, in full Patrice Henry Lumumba, was born on July 2, 1925 in Belgian Congo, now Democratic Republic of Congo. He was an African nationalist leader and the first Prime Minister of Democratic Republic of Congo from June to September 1960. Forced out of office during a political crisis, Lumumba was born in the village of Onalua in Kasai Province, Belgian Congo. He was a member of the small Batetela ethnic group, a fact that became significant in his later political life. His two principal rivals, Moise Tsombe, who led the breakaway of the Katanga province, and Joseph Kasavubu, who later became the Congo's president, both came from large, powerful ethnic groups from which they derived their major support, giving their political movement a regional character. In contrast, Lumumba's movement emphasized its all-Congolese nature. After attending a Protestant mission school, Lumumba went on to work with Kindu Port, where he became active in the Club of Western Educated Africans. He began to write essays and poems for Congolese journals. He also applied for and received full Belgian citizenship. Lumumba then next moved to Leopoldville, now Kinshasa, to become a postal clerk and went on to become an accountant in the post office in Stanleyville, now Kisangani. There, he continued to contribute to the Congolese press. In 1955, Lumumba became regional president of the purely Congolese Trade Union of Government Employees. He also became active in the Belgian Liberal Party in the Congo. Although conservative in many ways, the party was not linked to either of the trade union federations, which were hostile to it. In 1956, Lumumba was invited with others on a study tour of Belgium under the auspices of the Minister of Colonies. On his return, he was arrested on a charge of embezzlement from the post office. He was convicted and condemned 1 year later after various reductions of sentence to 12 months imprisonment and a fine. When Lumumba got out of prison, he grew even more active in politics. In October 1958, along with other Congolese leaders, launched the Congolese National Movement, or the Movement National Congolese, MNC, the first nationwide Congolese political party. In December, he attended the first All-African People's Conference in Accra, Ghana, where he met nationalists from across the African continent and was made a member of the permanent organization set up by the conference. His outlooks and vocabulary, inspired by Pan-African goals, now took on the tenor of militant nationalism. As nationalist fervor increased, the Belgian government announced a program intended to lead the independence for the Congo, starting with local elections in December 1959. The nationalists regarded this program as a scheme to install puppets before independence and announced a boycott of the elections. The Belgian authorities responded with repression. On October 30th that same year, there was a clash in Stanleyville that resulted in 30 deaths. Lumumba was imprisoned on a charge of inciting to riot. The MNC decided to shift tactics, entered the elections and won a sweeping victory in Stanleyville, 90% of the votes. In January 1960, the Belgian government convened a round-table conference in Brussels of all Congolese parties to discuss political change, but the MNC refused to participate without Lumumba. Lumumba was thereupon released from prison and flown to Brussels. The conference agreed on a date for independence, June 30th, with national elections in May. Although there was multiplicity of parties, the MNC came out far ahead in the elections, and Lumumba emerged as a leading nationalist politician of the Congo. Maneuvers to prevent his assumption of authority failed, and he was asked to form the first government, which he did on June 24, 1960. Almost immediately after the June 30th independence date, some units of the army rebelled, largely because of objections to the Belgian commander Moise Tsombe, who took advantage of the ensuing confusion, using it as an opportunity to proclaim that the mineral-rich province of Katanga was seceding from the Congo. Belgium sent troops to protect Belgian nationals in the disorder, but the Belgian troops landed principally in Katanga. The Congo appealed to the United Nations to expel the Belgians and help them restore internal order. As Prime Minister, Lumumba did what little he could do to redress the situation. His army was an uncertain instrument of power, his civilian administration untrained and untried. The United Nations forces, whose presence he had requested, were condescending and assertive, and the political alliances underlying his regime very shaky. The Belgian troops did not leave, and the Katanga secession continued. Since the United Nations refused to help suppress the Katangese revolt, Lumumba appealed to the Soviet Union for planes to assist in transporting the troops to Katanga. He asked the independent African states to meet in Leopoldville in August to unite their efforts behind him. His moves alarmed many, particularly the Western powers and the supporters of President Kasavubu, who pursued a moderate course in the coalition government and favored some local autonomy in the provinces. On September 5th, President Kasavubu dismissed Lumumba, but the legalities of the move were immediately contested by Lumumba. As a result of the discord, there were two groups now claiming to be the legal central government. On September 14th, power was seized by the Congolese army leader, Colonel Joseph Mobutu, later president of Zaire as Mobutu Sese Seko, who later reached a working agreement with Kasavubu. In November, the General Assembly of the United Nations recognized the credentials of Kasavubu's government. The independent African states split sharply over the issue. Meanwhile, in October, Lumumba had been placed under house arrest in Leopoldville, guarded not only by Mobutu's forces but by those of the UN as well, which provided him with protection. After the General Assembly decided to recognize Kasavubu's government, Lumumba escaped from home confinement and sought to travel to Stanleyville, where his supporters had control. However, he was caught by Mobutu's forces and arrested on December 2nd. Lumumba was initially held at a military camp in Thiesville, but concerns that the soldiers there were sympathetic to him led Belgian, Congolese and Katangan authorities to arrange for his transfer to a different location that they deemed to be more secure and one that would almost certainly guarantee his death. On January 17, 1961, Lumumba and two associates, Joseph Okito and Maurice Mpolo, were flown to Elizabethville, now Lubumbashi, where they were delivered to the secessionist regime in Katanga and its Belgian advisors. On their flight there, they had been beaten by the soldiers escorting them, and once they landed in Katanga, they were beaten again. Later that day, Lumumba, Okito and Mpolo were executed by a firing squad under Belgian command. Although their bodies were initially thrown into shallow graves, they were later dug up under the direction of Belgian officials, hacked into pieces, and dissolved in acid. The Katangan government withheld official announcement of his death until February 13, and then claimed that Lumumba had escaped from their custody and had been discovered by villagers who killed him. Rumors of Lumumba's death had circulated soon after it occurred. The government's explanation of his death was quickly disputed, although it would take decades for the full circumstances surrounding his death to be made public. His death caused a scandal throughout Africa and beyond. Retrospectively, even his enemies proclaimed him a national hero. The reasons that Lumumba provoked such intense emotion are not immediately evident. His viewpoint was not exceptional. He was for a unitary Congo and against division of the country along ethnic and regional lines. Like many other African leaders, he supported Pan-Africanism and the liberation of colonial territories. He proclaimed his regime one of positive neutralism, which he defined as return of African values and rejection of any imported ideology, including that of Soviet Union. Lumumba was, however, a man of strong character who intended to pursue his policies regardless of the enemies he had made within his country or abroad. The Congo, furthermore, was a key area in terms of the geopolitics of Africa. And because of its wealth, size and proximity to white-dominated Southern Africa, Lumumba's opponents had reasons to fear the consequences of a radical and radicalized Congo regime. Moreover, in the context of the Cold War, the Soviet Union's support for Lumumba appeared at the time as a threat to many in the West. Congo's transition from a Belgian colony to an independent country occurred against the backdrop of a larger decolonization movement in Africa. It also occurred at a time when the international political climate was dominated by the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union and their respective allies. The assassination of Lumumba was a brutal and squalid atrocity. It was engineered by Mobutu and by the Belgian government in an effort to re-establish their influence and to protect its interest in the Congo. That is the story of Patrice Lumumba. Thanks for watching African Edge.